This is Vince here at Martial Arts Insight. The last fight I'd like to talk about in my review of UFC 141 is Brock Lesnar versus Alistair Overeem. This was to decide who would become the number one contender for the heavyweight championship belt to go on to fight Junior Dos Santos sometime later in 2012. It was a classic matchup between Brock Lesnar, the wrestler, and Alistair Overeem, the kickboxing striker. In the build-up to the fight, I think a lot of people were finding it difficult to call. It was kind of like a 50-50 fight where if Brock Lesnar was able to take down Alistair Overeem, but he would go on to win the fight. If Alistair Overeem was able to keep the fight standing, then he would take the victory. I think possibly there was a slight tendency towards favouring Alistair Overeem because Brock Lesnar was coming from his second bout of surgery for his abdominal disease, and people didn't know if that was going to affect his fitness or if he was going to be suffering from ring rust. My own personal opinion in my prediction for the fight was that the decisive factor would actually be whether or not Brock Lesnar had mentally conditioned himself to be able to take a shot. We'd seen him fight against both Shane Carwin and Cain Velasquez, where when he was being threatened with being punched or kicked, he had a very apparent tendency to retreat very quickly from the blows that were directed towards him. And against Alistair Overeem, he could expect to have the same experience again. And what I'm talking about here is not whether or not Brock Lesnar could actually physically take a punch, because I mean against Shane Carwin, for example, I mean he was beaten up in the first round, but he wasn't actually knocked out, and he came back in the second round to win by submission. So I'm not talking about his actual physical capability as far as taking a punch is concerned. It's more of a mental approach. In wrestling, obviously there are no strikes, and it's something that he's not conditioned to. His body nor his mind is conditioned towards being punched and kicked, and this causes him to retreat, or had caused him in the past to retreat very quickly from the punches and strikes coming in from, for example, Shane Carwin and Cain Velasquez. So what I was interested to see is whether or not Brock Lesnar could actually stay in the pocket, stay in punching range, trade punches with Alistair Overeem. Not that it became a boxing match or a kickboxing match, but stay in the pocket long enough to maybe get hit once or twice, and then move forward for a double leg takedown, where on the ground he could use his submission skills or ground and pound to beat Alistair Overeem. So that was what I was looking out for, is whether or not Brock Lesnar was actually going to retreat or not from Alistair Overeem. And what we actually saw in the fight, I think there were two contributing factors as to why Alistair Overeem was able to take to win the match by TKO in the first round. I think one of them was Brock Lesnar's reaction to being hit, which I'll discuss in a second. And the second point, I think, was Alistair Overeem's, I think, brilliant strategy that he used to beat Brock Lesnar, which I'll get onto that again later. So going back to the first point and Brock Lesnar's reaction to being punched and kicked. Now, Lesnar did not react as badly as he did against Shane Carwin and Cain Velasquez. But if you watch the fight, he spent a lot of time with his weight on the back leg. He wasn't actually rapidly retreating from being punched or kicked, but he was ready to rapidly retreat from being punched or kicked if he needed to do so. And from the point of view of being a counter puncher, having your weight back, that's where you want it to be. But from the point of view of a wrestler who's trying to be aggressive and go in to shoot for the double leg takedown, or from the point of view of someone who's trying to outstrike, who's trying to be an aggressive striker, having your weight too far back is not where you want it to be. And Lesnar never really shot in for a takedown, and I'll discuss why I think that was difficult for him in a second. He did try and throw a couple of punches, but trying to be aggressive when your weight is on your rear leg is extremely difficult, because you have to transfer your weight from your rear leg onto your front leg and then launch the actual technique. And all of this is telegraphing what you're actually doing. And against someone of Alistair Overeem's quality, you're going to find it very, very difficult to land a punch like that, because you're just giving him too much of a warning as to what it is you're going to do. And of course, by failing to shoot for the double leg, Lesnar never got the fight into the range where he would be able to dominate, which is on the ground grappling. So the question is, how was Alistair Overeem able to control the fight, and stop Lesnar from shooting him for the double leg? And this is the second point, which I think Overeem came up with an outstanding strategy as to how he could control the fight. Now, what we saw with Shane Carwin and Cain Velasquez is that they took the traditional strikers approach to fighting Brock Lesnar, which is that they came in primarily with punches, some kicks, but primarily with punches, and this is what caused Lesnar to retreat. The danger there is that by focusing your attention on your upper body as you're punching, you're leaving your lower body section open for the double leg shoot from Brock Lesnar, and that's often how strikers are caught. Their attention is in their upper body, and the wrestler is shooting in low to take them down onto the ground. Now, what Alistair Overeem did is he never really turned it into a kickboxing match in terms of throwing punches and throwing kicks. What he did instead, he relied on using his knees to attack Brock Lesnar. And this is an extremely important point, because one of the simplest way to defend against a single leg or a double leg takedown is to sprawl. And that's typically how a striker will deal with a wrestler. They'll work on their takedown defense. A much more effective way of dealing with a wrestler who's shooting into your legs is that as they're shooting in towards you, you raise your knee in the hope of connecting with his face and knocking him out as he's coming in to take you down. And if that works, it's an extremely effective counter-attack. It's not a defensive move as such. It's an actual counter towards the takedown. The only problem with it is that it's extremely difficult to actually pull off. And again, someone like Brock Lesnar, who despite his size, is highly dexterous and very, very fast. It would the advantage if Lesnar had tried to shoot for Overeem, I think the advantage would have been on the side of Brock Lesnar. So what Overeem did was brilliant, because by keeping his own attention focused downwards onto his into his lower area, and by using his knees as his primary weapon, he prevented Lesnar from being able to shoot for his legs with safety. Had Lesnar attempted a takedown, he could have very easily found himself diving into one of Overeem's upward rising knees, in which case he would have been knocked out there and then. So Lesnar clearly did not want to know about that. So what Overeem did is he spent the fight closing onto Lesnar, getting into something like a clinch range, and then using his own knees to weaken up Brock Lesnar. The actual TKO came about as a result of a roundhouse kick to the liver, which I think basically there and then ended the fight. I don't think Lesnar was going to get up from that. The actual flurry of punches that came after just sealed the victory for Alistair Overeem. So actually, I thought a very, very good fight. Two main points then. I think that Lesnar was too passive. I don't think he wanted to be aggressive. And the second point, which I think could possibly have very wide implications for the world of MMA, was Overeem's strategy of, despite being a striker, he didn't use the obvious weapons of his punches and his kicks. He used his knees, and that allowed him to close the distance with Lesnar, while also putting Lesnar highly at risk if he had shot down and tried for the double leg takedown. Okay, so that's the end of my reviews for the fights at UFC 141, so please check out Martial Arts Insight. Thanks.